Hey everyone, for today's video I wanted to discuss the Supreme Grade Blades, which of course as we all know is the highest rank of blades in the One Piece verse. I'll be going through the potential wielders of these blades while discussing those who have already been confirmed to have one at this point in the story. Before we get to all of that though, if this is your first time here, or if you just enjoy One Piece discussions like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. And hit the like button too to help with the algorithm. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. Now, when discussing the Supreme Grade Blades or Supreme Grade Weapons or Supreme Grade Swords as they're most commonly referred to, I think it's important to point out that they're not all swords. It was specified in chapter 912 that this classification of weapons may also include spears and other weapons that don't actually count as swords. And we already have one confirmed Supreme Grade Blade that we know not to be a sword. When it comes to these blades as a whole though, my view on them is that the wielders are people of particular renown and of a certain strength level, so I don't see an average commander or vice admiral holding one. There's not too many of them in the grand scheme, so I think it makes sense that these supreme weapons belong to supreme combatants, the absolute best of the best. For the ones that have already been confirmed, we have Murakumogiri, wielded by Whitebeard, the world's strongest man. We have Yoru, wielded by Mayhawk, the world's strongest swordsman. And lastly, we have Ace, wielded by the Pirate King, Gold Roger. So this just goes to show that these blades are not used by just anyone. For Roger in particular, it wasn't confirmed until recently that his sword was a supreme grade. But I think it was pretty obvious. There was so much precedence there that it would have been pretty shocking to find out if it was of a lower rank, or even not ranked at all. His rival and equal was confirmed to possess one, so you would think he would have one as well, especially after their clash in chapter 966. And his use of the sword against someone as powerful as Odin, effortlessly discarding him with a named attack. And then you have Whitebeard, who, although is known more for his use of the most powerful devil fruit, the Gura Gura, has shown great proficiency with his blade throughout the series, from Marineford to the Odin flashback, so I think it's fitting that a legend on his level fights with one of the most powerful weapons of all time. And then we have Mayhawk. He may possibly possess the most powerful bladed weapon of all time, the Supreme Grade Black Blade Yoru. And there's still so much we don't know about Mayhawk, but just as much that we don't know about Yoru. Like, was it forged into this rank? Or was it already this rank and did becoming black put it above even the other supreme grades? One thing we know for sure is that among all swords, its hardness is unrivaled. So we'll have to wait and see what other special properties it has and what advantages it gives Mayhawk. We know of another supreme grade sword, and that's a Shodai Kitetsu. Many speculate that the sword that Gorosei Gandhi wields is the same Kitetsu, and this is not unlikely at all. Being the only one of the 5 elders to be shown with the weapon, I definitely do not think it's at all crazy that this may be the last of the Kitetsu blades. At this moment in time, we're all trying to figure out if these 5 men are just figureheads or if they have top tier combat ability. Ideas have been thrown around that they're actually weak and can't fight at all. Now, I don't think they're like, let's say, stronger than the admirals or anything, but given the scars on them, I do think it's very possible that they have significant battle experience. In any case, we'll see what direction Oda takes with them. But going back to the specific elder that wields a blade, if he does in fact have the Shodai, I think it makes a lot of sense given his position of authority over the entire world government. And maybe that doesn't come with a lot of renown, but that still holds a great amount of significance. You know, because I'm not sure if they're all easily recognized by the public or if they're shadow figures like Emu, but at this moment I'd be more inclined to lean a little towards the latter. Now, let's get into the other 8 blades and who may have them. The very first person to come to mind is Shanks, the world's 2nd strongest swordsman. And you know, my view of Shanks may differ with a lot of people, but I definitely see him as a swordsman every bit as much as Mayhawk, given their rivalry and the little bits of Shanks that we have seen so far. We have a name for his sword already, but oddly enough, we do not have a rank. But I think it's easy to say that this sword of his is of the supreme grade. He was shown clashing with the world's strongest man and his supreme grade, and was able to stop an attack from the strongest admiral as well. His Viva card tells us of the many fierce battles he's fought with it as he was making his way up to the top of the pirate world, so that should tell us how much value he places on it. One thing that I am very curious about when it comes to a swordsman of Shanks' caliber is how their journey leads him to acquiring blades of this potential quality. Because of course, we see Shanks with a sword in the Odin flashback, but there's no way that's Griffin. I mean, obviously there's this whole thing with Oda where he lets his sword grow or shrink depending on who is wielding it, but in this case, I think it was an unnamed sword. But I'm still wondering, who may have possessed Griffin before Shanks, or if it was crafted for him, or if he somehow increased the rank on his own. So you can see there's a lot of possibilities when it comes to these swords and the overall sword lore, with the very limited amount of information that we have. The next potential wielder of a supreme grade is the Naval Admiral Fujitora. And you know, there's not really too much to say, and we don't have to really dig too deep here. Fujitora has been confirmed to be a swordsman. He is one of the strongest individuals in the entire series. He is a monster with power to spare, and has been shown to be very proficient in his usage of the blade in conjunction with his powers to control gravity. So I think he is very deserving to be one of these wielders, and we're sure to see more of his ability with the blade in future chapters. And hopefully we get a bit of a flashback to the fight of Marijua. With the arrival of Fujitora, we also have Green Bull, and combatively he has been hyped up as Fuji, but we have no idea how he fights. We don't even know what he looks like, because 114 chapters later, Oda still has him in a silhouette. But I think it's possible that Oda could be going with the same kind of setup here as he did with Fuji. The trio from the pre-time skip were all straight up low gear users with no usage of weapons or other abilities as far as we know. So for Fuji and Green Bull, they may both be paramecia swordsmen. And I think this is especially likely because as the series goes on, we're starting to see more and more sword users, and swordsmanship is gaining more prominence. And we have all these slots that need to be filled up, not just for the supreme grades, but all the other ranked swords. So there's a bunch of candidates that are showing up. In any case, if it turns out that Green Bull is in fact a swordsman, I think he'll have one of the supreme grades, given his admiral rank. But in any case, time will tell and we'll see what he's about. We also have Zabek, and him as well. He is still very heavily silhouetted, and we have very limited information on his combat style, but we have a bit more than we do with Green Bull. It was shown that he was fighting with a sword in the small panel that we got for God Valley, and that's honestly enough for me. With what we have been given with Roger and Whitebeard, I think it's safe to say if Zabek is a swordsman, he had a supreme grade sword. And apart from just that, it was implied that he was possibly Roger's greatest foe. And of course we have the fact that he led a crew with individuals who would later come to be known as pirates standing at the pinnacle of the pirate world. Absolute legends. And we're all patiently waiting for this Rocks flashback to see what a man of this stature is capable of, as well as all these legends on his crew. Speaking of which, there are 3 of them in particular that are less commonly discussed, but who I still think are important to consider for this discussion. That's Captain John, Silver Axe, and Wang Ji. I think they are definitely some prime candidates to wield supreme grades as well. It's been theorized by fans for a couple of years now that the 3 individuals we saw at the forefront of the General Zombies and Thriller arc may in fact be these 3 legendary pirates. And I think this makes a lot of sense. We already have Captain John confirmed, but the other 2 fit the bill as well. We have an axe wielder who is likely a Silver Axe, and next to him we have someone who sort of resembles a Chinese conqueror, and that's likely to be Wang Ji. There's also Rayleigh, the right hand of the Pirate King, and we know for a fact that he does not have a devil fruit because of his ability to swim the calm belt, so it should be obvious swordsmanship is his preferred method of combat. Especially because when it came to defending the Straw Hats from an Admiral, he showed up with his sword and was able to effectively fend him off, and even gave Kizaru some trouble, to the point that Sentomaru stated he's never seen anyone stop his uncle like this. And we have him getting mentioned alongside Whitebeard as a tall task for the Navy to handle, and in the flashback we see him and Roger both holding up their swords after finishing a battle. There's his portrayal as a Dark King and the weight that comes with that, and the fact that he outright has Supreme King's Haki. I think this is way more than enough reason for him to be a wielder of a supreme grade blade, and honestly there are not too many people you can put over him when it comes to stature. Next we have Luffy's supreme grade Nah, I'm just playing. But nah, seriously, the next person I had in mind to mention was Loki. But honestly, it doesn't have to be Loki at all because we don't know how he fights or if he's a fighter. You know, he could just be a figurehead. But when it comes to Elbaf as a whole and how renowned they are for being the world's strongest nation, I would think they have a top tier or 2. And if that's the case, I think it's very possible we can find a couple of giants who possess supreme grades as well. And as I mentioned earlier, they don't have to use swords. I'm still anxiously waiting to see what a top tier spear user can do, if we ever see one. There should be a host of other Elbaf techniques that we haven't seen yet, and the few that we have seen were incredibly destructive. So just imagine what the strongest giant with the strongest grade of weapon can do. It's just outright unimaginable. And the last person who I think may potentially wield a supreme grade is Shiriu of the Rain. He may not have as much prestige as some of the names I've mentioned on a global scale, but his place in the story definitely gives him reason to be at a certain level of power, and as his captain Blackbeard grows and gains more influence and power, so should he. Given his history as a former warden of Impel Down, and now the presumed strongest Blackbeard subordinate, I think he's had a path carved out for him to attain some noteworthy power. And if he's to be set up to face off against a Zoro who has gained as much battle experience and power as he ought to in Wano, then he clearly has to be high up enough to be a challenge for him to spur some more growth. Now, there's a fact that Zoro may go into the fight with the supreme grade weapon of his own. Raising Enma's rank by turning it black with whatever transpires in the raid may render it a sword of that level, so it would make sense for his opponent in the Blackbeard Pirates to be fighting with the supreme grade sword as well. In any case, I'm sure we're all trying to figure out what exactly raising the rank of a sword entails, so we'll see how that goes. Something very interesting that I wanted to point out is the fact that there was a book that was published well over 200 years ago by the name of Kaiho Kenjaku. And in that book, graded weapons, or wazamono, were discussed in great detail. It becomes obvious that Oda took inspiration from this book when it comes to the classification system in his own story. Just like in One Piece, this book had 12 supreme grades, 21 great grades, and 50 skillful grades. Some years later, there were an additional 3 swords that were added to the number of supreme grades for a total of 15. And some of us speculate that Zoro himself will eventually forge 3 black blades to give himself 3 supreme grade swords, which will add to the current 12 in One Piece as well. Now, is this coincidence? I don't think so, but who's to say for sure? We'll just have to wait and see if this really aligns with what Oda's been planning all along. But it does make sense that Zoro would just add to the number of supreme grades instead of just, taking the spot of some other swords or something. Now, there are a few people that I think will make for great candidates to wield supreme grades. But the issue for me is that I feel like it doesn't make too much sense for a dual blade user to have one. And specifically that would include Vista and Shiki. I think for them it makes more sense to have 2 great swords similar to Odin. But who knows, honestly. It's not like we have any rules for this, so if Oda wanted either of them to just straight up have one, then it would just happen. Maybe at some point I'll make a video to discuss the great swords in detail as well, because there's a lot more people to choose from for those. I kind of had to dig deep to put names together for this one because there's not a lot of people I think necessarily fit the criteria for wielders of supreme grades. But those are all my thoughts on the topic, and with that we've reached the end of this video. As always, I want to hear what you guys think and who you think is fit to wield these legendary blades. Comment your list down below, but also don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications by hitting the bell as well.